Welcome everybody to this session of the Jewish Art Salon. I just wanted to thank artists Dorit, Dotan, Judith, Joseph, Cheselyn Amato, who are all here on the call, plus Chana, Wiesenthal, Elias, who couldn't be on the call, for their very hard work getting this series together. It is so appreciated by all of us. I am now giving it to who?
Dorit.
Dorit.
Hello, everybody, and happy Hanukkah. We just lit the sixth candle here. Welcome to the Jewish Art Salon Open Studios online programs. We will be presenting 1-hour programs with 2 to 4 artists once or twice a month into spring 2021. Actually, we already have program till the summer, I believe. The featured artists in upcoming programs are members of the Jewish Art Salon who responded to a call or were invited. The next program will be next week, Tuesday, December 22nd at noon Eastern Time. Artist presenters will be Audrey Anastasi, Ellen Lux, and Joanne Scherger. Today, we will present these 3 artists, Ashley Fitzgerald, Diane Britt, and Asherah Cinnamon. Ashley Scott Fitzgerald is a contemporary abstract art artist. He was born in London and earned both BA and MA in fine art. His creative process is influenced by his own near-death experience and recovery from temporary paralysis. These events led to Ashley further exploring methods of wrapping, layering, and stripping back of old drawings and artifacts. Ashley says, my interest continues in a process of connecting body, books, myths, cultural history, shrouds, and creating this into Golem, like identities to be released from their isolation, from the perspective of the outsider, and reflect the transformation of death into life. Go ahead, Ash.
Most people know me as Ash. I live in London in the UK. It's a great opportunity to share today in this virtual open studio session with Jewish Art Salon. I have been invited.
Oops.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, I think I paused it by accident. Oh, man.
To speak about my connection to golems and its influence in my work. This presentation has my voiceover providing a narrative to each slide, and hope you can hear me okay. So, to start off with, just give you some background on how I was drawn into creating the golem related art forms alongside other relic-based work. It came about following a near-death experience in 1993 as a result of Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS, which causes paralysis. Basically, GBS is a viral infection and the immune system response is to turn it on itself, shutting muscles down, which left me temporarily trapped in my own body. At first, I was on life support connected to many tubes. I was fortunate to survive after several months in rehab. I made a slow and gradual recovery, learning how to walk and talk again. During this time, when I was trapped inside my body, unable to move or communicate, my creative visualization saw me transition from death into life, and this experience led me to focus on the golem legend and the undead, how it was created from dead matter into life. On recovery, my health now includes long-term conditions and disabling episodes with reduced mobility. Whilst I can walk, I can still experience some weakness in the hands, legs, from time to time. During my time in the rehab ward, my personal life support was listening to music through my old Walkman and drawing to the music as I gained more strength to hold pencils and become mobile. This slide shows some of my early drawings as a storyboard, progressing from being in bed to sitting in a wheelchair. Eventually, after 6 months, I was discharged from hospital to continue my recovery at home. During my presentation to you today, I am showing only a snapshot of different styles in drawings, paintings, installations, sculpture with shrouding and layering, recycling old artifacts and books. I have even had one of my skull pen and ink drawings recreated into a tattoo, which can be seen on this slide too. The impact post-recovery saw me grab life through exploration on how to extend my experiences into creative art forms and how to capture death into life, a series of empty body forms evolve into layers of new life, in order to create a series of contemporary art pieces of mixed medium art, based on the themes of relationships of body and book, connecting bloodlines with the undead and golems. Another exploration has seen me use film. This images on the slide are stills from 2 films of that journey as I move forward towards my creative process. For example, in 2017, a short golem film called Burning Anxiety as part of a group project for Venice Art Biennale. This film is a visual depiction of golem-like beings, their slow disintegration as they transform from life to death, back into the new sense of being. I will show this later. Most recent collaboration is a video documentary called Open Art Surgery with a fellow artist as we shared our both near-death experiences impacted on our art. It explores layering of anatomy and looking at rebuilding of our creative insights. At the end of this presentation, there are 3 links to videos I mentioned for those who are interested can view in your own time. But the true depth of my golem journey established itself when in 2010 I started my Masters in Fine Arts. This provided an opportunity to explore further my connection with death to life in creating golems in many different mediums, as shown in this next slide, some images on how they evolved. Initially, as seen in this slide, I looked at the style of creating them from leaves and earth, forming a body of both lying and standing, as this demonstrated a connection of my movement from having been on life support, unable to move, and rebuilding of my body to a standing life form. The materials I mainly used was recycled paper and cardboard when creating these forms, as seen in this slide. Each takes the shape of a singular form. The shrouding drapes towards recycled books, while its small golems reach out, are all extensions of self to reconnect. My MA enabled me to move forward, experimenting with different mediums, which reflected on my reconnection as a solitary being and how I felt when I came out of hospital, the feeling of being an outsider like the golem and relearning social interaction. At times, it felt like I was wrapping and unwrapping shrouds of my very being. I also made a very short film cutting down golem during my MA, and this slide has some stills from the film. This was a shrouding installation of a suspended being to reflect on the removing of tubes which have connected to me to life support. As I cut down and folded it up, they represented my being able to walk away from death, ready to face new life. For this, I used recycled tarpaulin and paper. The final showpiece, as shown in this slide, was called Body and Book. This particular work contains 2 main themes: resurrection as demonstrated by the author that is supporting the shrouded body and creating an emerging golem, and connection to book-like sculpture, which represents knowledge and a recording of that event. I instilled a sense of animation as a shrouded figure is reaching out towards the book. This is a metaphor for my struggle with dyslexia and my striving to gain knowledge despite my disability. The transformational process and the theme of resurrection are represented in used materials that were once abandoned and I recycled, such as tarpaulin and paper over a tailor's dummy connected to wire, hardboard and plaster, giving them a new life and form. This closely reflects my recovery from disease and reshaping my old self, giving myself a new direction and purpose. As said, my process now takes many forms, and this slide shows just a small example of my exploring methods of wrapping, layering, and stripping back old drawings and artifacts. My interest continues in the process of connecting body, books, myths, cultural and medieval history, shrouds and creating these into golem-like identities, to be released from their isolation, that of the outsider, and reflect of transforming death into life. I also continue creating mixed media drawings such as seen in this slide, when I use pen and ink or paint markers. This is trying to recreate many different interpretations of the golem identity. For example, on some they have only one eye, as this is a memory from my slow recovery from GBS when I could only open one eye. My left eye remained closed for several months until the muscles recovered. Also, the circle in the chest represents my heart beating the cycle of life. Over time, my process continued as a visual narrative related to golem influences and life frozen in time. For example, in this slide, the images of creatures which can be born out of violent, vibrant, volcanic place such as Pompeii. Here, this translates into how the Jewish legend of the golem was to protect community. So in the same way, these forms are as to protect people's homes from natural disasters. More like environmental guards to ecologically preserve our planet and all its living creatures to be safe from extinction. I created these from recycled materials such as old cardboard, paper, cutting into them to make unique as they start to take their form from layering materials in a collage-based process before finally sealing them with acrylic and other materials, even using shoe polish. And during COVID lockdown, art has been my therapy as I've been unable to get into my studio, being classed as a high risk, having an autoimmune condition. So for the last months, as seen in this slide, I've been drawing and looking at my materials found at home, such as tea bags, staining, shoe polish, even using Tipp-Ex corrective white fluid to create golem figures and ghost-like faces with a haunting presence. And like many of us during this year interrupted by COVID, I'm looking forward to returning to my studio to get messy again and to reconnect with my golems that I've been left watching over my studio during my absence. To finish, I will show my film Burn Anxiety. For me personally, reflects on the process of anxiety life cycles experienced and having felt burnt of the smouldering emotions after facing death to my eventual recovery. After each event, the sense of release of life evolves. In the same way, I engage with the images of Pompeii, which of me hold a frozen sense of calm. In this, I discover a new relationship with self as I relate to the burning, unwrapping, stripping down, and to overcome internal anxiety and preparedness for new journeys. The small sculptures in this film are made for plaster over wire painted over household white emulsion, which slowly burns with smoulders and was filmed under safe fire conditions. Thank you for listening to me share my creative process, what influenced me in the legend of the Golem. The final slide has the video links I mentioned in this preparation. You can find examples of my work mainly on Instagram under the name Golem Ash.
Thank you so much, Ash.
Thank you.
That was phenomenal.
Dev is asking a question. What was your art before the illness?
Sorry, say that again?
What was your art before the illness? Is Bev Ritchie's asking?
It was abstract. It was purely abstract. So it was more like painting and printmaking, abstract figures. It wasn't really anything representational. It was just playing around with color and form. And then he went into my MA course, then I decided to go to more representational. But I wanted to meet the two in between.
I have a question. I'm just wondering if the going through the illness affected you physically as you came out of it in terms of making art. I'm sure it affected your body and your vision. And how did that affect your artistic expression?
Oh, it took a while because it was more, I was still doing arts when I was recovering slowly in hospital. But what happened was I didn't know how my limitations were. I just thought to myself, well, just keep playing what you're doing. There was no ideas, no thoughts. It's just how my bodies were responding, what my hands were doing, what my body was responding to the materials. So it was really like a subconscious effort, really. I just wanted to play, and I was listening to a lot of music. So it was very, very, obviously it was a long process of recovery. I just wanted to still stick with the abstract. And so I just made sure I was gradually sort of like performing while I was recovering. So I was kind of limiting myself but pushing myself at the same time.
That's amazing that how it integrated with your recovery.
Yes, because no one knew how long the recovery is. And with Guillain-Barré syndrome, there is a symbol called the turtle or tortoise, and it's a slow recovery. So the slow recovery is as long as you all know you're going to be okay, but you don't know how long you can recover for. So.
Got it. Cynthia Rubin has a question for you. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah, I have a question where the video. So first of all, before I get into this, I have to say the work was very moving, and I'm really
thank you.
Find the recycling, carrying away, rebuilding process really brings depth to it. That being said, in where the video fits in, is that
my burning anxiety.
Okay, is it recent? I mean, time.
It was about 3 years ago. It's like a semi-biographical little film that I did, because it was all the little golems are about myself and how I'm developing. So I use materials that I can find and I can quickly identify myself. So it was kind of accidental as well, because I wanted to do just one golem, me, and then I became a multitude of other golems. So I thought it's like the burning is like recreation and resurrection and rebirth. It's like when you see like a burning field for crops, burns, and then they comes back again as fresh produce. So that was it. That was me kind of burning and coming back again.
Okay.
So the slowing is the burning is the slow recovery.
Okay, it would be great to see what happens if you do more. And when you said
yes, I
under
like to do bigger
circumstances,
versions.
I thought if this is during lockdown, how did you make it safe? Like in your bathtub? But you did it 3 years ago. So that's
Well, I'm going to pop in so we can move on to our next presenter. Thanks for your question, Cynthia. And Ash, thanks very much. It was very. Our next presenter is Diane Britt. Diane Britt is a Birmingham, Ohio artist working in drawing, paper, and book arts, textiles, sculpture, installation, and performance. She studied art at UMass Boston and was once a member of the World Sculpture Racing Society. Diane has exhibited widely in the US and abroad, and her work is in several private and public collections. During her 2019 Akron Soul Train residency, she created My Golem, an installation of flax paper sculptures, drawings, maps, textiles, photographs, and original sculptures. Currently, Diane is developing new projects that integrate visual arts, history, and oral traditions. One such new work is Uncle Pinky POW, an installation, storytelling, and interactive experience seen through the eyes of her mother at age 7, her soldier uncle, and her own imaginings. Diane draws strongly from both individual experiences and those of the world around her, linking the personal with the political and humanistic, cultural, and physical realms. She values play, curiosity, and engaging the world, and self as a lifelong process of growth and change, seeking ways to experiment, court vulnerability, and take risks.
Thank you. So I live on a river. This is down in a hollow, back in the woods, but the river is the heart and soul of everything here for me and my world, and everything, I would say, for hundreds and hundreds of acres all around. And it's this living, breathing body of water that I have a relationship with every day through every season. I'm checking on it. I'm, excuse me, taking its pulse, looking at its character for its placidity and gentleness, or fierceness, danger, great beauty every day and all the time. And it's, of course, what feeds everything around here. It's also full of destruction, so it also destroys as much as it feeds. And when I first began reading and hearing about the story of the Golem, the stories that were so beautifully told by Wiesenthal and Singer especially, I could relate on a really personal, visceral level, you know, imagining Rabbi Lowe at the Vltava, taking mud from it, and holding it in his hands, creating this creature after his struggles and his prayers and answer from God. And because I know what it's like to touch this, to be in the river, the mud, what it creates, the minerals, the plants, and to bring these things back to my home, my property, my studio. So I could imagine myself there with him, as in a way I could almost imagine all of this happening here. And so I became really involved in this in many ways. I did some drawings. I began dreaming about it, thinking about it. I began thinking about integrating a personal story into the old stories that connected the past with today. And I can show, so the river, just so beautiful in every season. But if we can go to the next one, this is my subjective drawing map of the Vermilion River watershed, which is where I live. I live about 10 miles south of Lake Erie, which is the very edges of which are depicted at the top. And I drew this to situate myself in this story on the river. If we could see the next slide, please. This was my drawing map of 16th century Europe, and not just as a way of thinking about Prague and the Golem there, but also of my own family, which I could imagine the very, very distant ancestors, particularly of my maternal grandparents. I had a very close relationship with my Bubby, who was from of Shtetl in Ukraine and who came to the US in 1910. So I've always had this image of being rooted there back through the centuries. And so I wanted to visually depict my connection with the Golem in the 16th century with my family, at least up into the 20th century, the very early 20th century. And and then around this time too, of course, lots of other things are going on in my work. And one of the things that I was developing was this very altered, developed, I guess, and evolved work in paper. And I had always loved paper, and kind of collected it. I had trouble sometimes letting it go. And as much as I love drawing and doing oil drawings and other things, making artist books, it was the paper sometimes that really was compelling to me. And so if we could see the next couple of slides. And so I took I had the good fortune to take a paper making and paper sculpture making workshop at the Morgan Conservatory in Cleveland. And I had already experimented a little bit with making paper, but not too far. And so this has really continued, especially into this year for me. Also being, pretty quarantined and homebound, I set up a small paper studio in my garage, and I've been taking private lessons with my paper sculpture teacher, Amy Richard. If we could see the next slide, please. And so these are just some examples of my very, very early work. And so I was doing this, I wasn't sure where I was going, I'm just working. And this is the early summer of 2019. And my husband and I took a trip to Boston to see family and friends. And while I was there, I got a call from my mom's first cousin, who said that he was selling my great aunt Anna's house. And this was my Bubby's oldest sister. Anna and Frida came to the US just before she did. She coming in 1910, and they were here 2 or 3 years before she came. And so if we could go to the next slide, please. And this is my depiction of my Bubby's emigration from Europe, and then immigration to the US on, of course, on a ship, a slow moving ship. And I really enjoyed this. I hadn't intended it to be quite so tumultuous in the drawing, but it just developed. And I think it's a perfect depiction of many of my own imaginings of what it could have been like for a 15-year-old girl who didn't speak anything but Yiddish and had no education and was really quite innocent and ignorant to make this trip. And so my husband and I went to my great aunt Anna's house, and what we found there were the 3 steamer trunks that had belonged to the girls. And when we opened my Bubby's, or started to open it, it was really crumbling and falling apart. And there wasn't. Oh yeah, sorry. This was up in the attic. I mean, it was really dirty and dusty, of course, and there wasn't much else salvageable up there. Just some old broken furniture and stuff. But it was amazing that these steamer trunks at least were there and sort of intact. But when we opened my Bubby's steamer trunk, we discovered that there was a false bottom to it. And so when we took it out, there were, astonishingly, there were these bits, these dried bits of what looked like a kind of combination clay and ceramic, broken, very broken, a lot of powdery stuff, along with all these dried up butterflies and caterpillars and flower petals and seeds. And it was really puzzling, of course. And of course, I'm obsessed with the Golem, so everything is Golem now. And I started making jokes with my husband about, well, it's the Golem, Rabbi Lowe's Golem that was, forgotten and then somehow smuggled through Europe and, obviously smuggled to the New World in my Bubby's steamer trunk in 1910. And so what we did, next slide, please, is we just packed it up and we drove home back to Ohio. And here's my map drawing of our property and what I've come to call the Golem reconstruction site. And what I did when we got here was think, well, I don't know what this is. And of course, I'm thinking it's a joke that I'm making, that it's the golem or a golem of any kind. And, you know, I sent my husband down to the river to get buckets of mud, and I tried to put it back together. Next slide, please.
We're coming to the end too, Diane.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And so the mud didn't work, but I was actually talking to a Kabbalah scholar in New York about this and getting consultation. And what he said was, well, what material has power for you that you can use if the mud isn't working? And so I used paper, and I used these freshly made sheets of flax paper, raw flax. And next slide, please. And I had some success in being able to put the bits together with these pieces of paper over a form first and then freestanding. Next slide, please. And then this is what it ended up looking like. And I was at this point where I was right in the middle of wrestling with my own questions about making this thing, if it was a golem, to try to make it be alive. And did I have the hubris, the daring, the courage to unleash onto the world what possibly could be a savior, something to help our community, which in 2019 we had never needed more. And yet I was terrified too, because there has never been a story of a golem that didn't also unleash danger and destruction onto the world. And so when I got to this point where the golem doesn't even have lower legs or full arms, I stopped. Next slide, please.
Diane, do you want to wrap it up? Should we move
that is, oh, sorry, that was it.
Okay.
That was my wrap.
Okay. All right. So I'm just looking at the chat. Maybe Dorit, you can help me with this too, because I want to.
Yeah. Okay, so there is a question by Wuti. How large are Diane's artwork on paper?
Oh, the paper is actually mostly fairly small. They're about 8 by 10, something like that.
Okay,
And then Kameta has a question too. Kameta, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Excuse me. Hi, thank you.
Hi.
We always think of the golem as a kind of man. So I'm just wondering how you as a woman think of the golem, and does the golem have gender, and just what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think because of the original stories that I read, the golem really was male, although you can see I didn't really create genitalia or, you know, I thought of him as a man, and that was a man's body, the kind of form, the shoulders and the hips and everything. But I think there's something ungendered about this golem as well, or multi-gendered, and that he contains, for me as a piece of artwork, a lot of potential to evoke all kinds of gendered feelings and thoughts and ideas.
Thank you.
And then we had one more question from Regina Gredas. I'll just read it. Is your last golem resting on a talus?
So my golem was actually in a steamer trunk resting on talit, which is deconsecrated, the right word. They were talit that were going to be buried in our synagogue, and my husband and I tied all the extra knots in it to change them from being the holy objects that they were, to make sure that we did that.
Well, thank you very much, Diane. I think
thank you.
I think the world needs a good golem right now.
It's upstairs and it's in the closet. So, you know, it's not going anywhere. I'm right here, and I can make the paper myself now. So
yeah, work your juju on that if you would. So, Dorit, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, our next presenter is going to be Asherah Cinnamon. Asherah writes, I'm an immigrant child of survivors of war and the Holocaust. Social justice and healing were at the center of my work even before I became an artist later in life. Dominant patterns of hiding our brokenness seriously prevents us from recognizing what is real. The world now spends $50,000 per second on wars against mostly BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. In winter of 2020, I was recovering from months of Lyme disease, weakness, and inability to work in my studio when COVID-19 hit. COVID-19 restrictions allowed the earth to begin to recover a bit and highlighted the leverage of human access. My life became more confined and my new work became smaller and more intimate. I have always connected deeply with trees and natural materials. Lately, I deliberately use damaged bark and show visible mending, not hiding brokenness, while I focus on reconnecting us to the earth through material and with each other through social sculpture. Asherah, go ahead.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. These woods behind these artists have been my inspiration for 35 years. And it is actually right next to a very small river, which runs through my life in many ways. This group of people is a group of artists, including my husband and my daughter. This was not this past summer, but the year before. It was the second time that I conducted an artist residency here on land that I'll talk about in a second. The residency is entitled War and Genocide, and that is the topic of conversation and work for us as we work. As a child of Holocaust survivors, I'm painfully aware that I have found really the first home ever on land that was stolen through violent genocide from the Wabanaki people of Maine. And I'm aware of that every time I step outside my door. I connect with natural materials. During COVID, I started to think about this period of time as a Shemitah. A Shemitah is a time when Jews allow the land to rest from cultivation every 7 years so that the land can recover. And as I said in my introduction, that recovery really showed us how much damage we've been doing. So I've been working with pine bark that I had harvested sustainably 2 years ago during COVID, making these small vessels. I've always been fascinated by the way that natural materials become anthropomorphic in my mind, so that I see creatures and animated life, even once the wood that I harvest has died. This piece, for instance, is about 4 feet tall and is a series of dancing women who are celebrating the birth in its center of all of creation. And as you see, I've had a fascination with the sort of creature-like nature of branches and roots. This piece is life-size and is called Shall We Fight or Dance? Thinking about when you meet a creature unlike yourself, what's your first thought? Which will you want to do? This is a piece I did right before Lyme disease knocked me down. It's a self-portrait that's about 3 feet high. Jauntily going out into the world with a kind of joy that I experience when I step outside my door, but never forgetting that in the back of my head is the pain of war and Holocaust. This is probably about as representational as my work ever gets. It's called Origin of a People, and those of you who know any history of Judaism will recognize some of the symbolism in it. One of the things I love to do with my work is engage other people. That's been particularly difficult during COVID. This is a piece that started on a residency with Art Kibbutz, New York, where I handed out strips of white paper to people and asked them, what have you done or what will you commit to do to heal the world? And they wrote their answers, which I then wove into this frame, which is a kind of altar on which we all offer whatever resources we have to the universe. I also enjoy, I'm not a religious Jew, but particularly since I became an artist, I am culturally deeply Jewish. And I love the values, the rituals, the objects that surround those rituals. This is a huppah that I built when my husband and I had our 25th wedding anniversary. And we had not been married in a synagogue. He's not Jewish, and my rabbi at the time would not perform it. So when we had our 25th wedding anniversary a few years ago, my husband said to me, what would you like to do to celebrate this? He said, would you like to have a Jewish wedding? So we did. And that was fun. And I'm particularly honored that the same huppah has been used in 2 other weddings since then. I've worked on a series. I love chairs because they relate directly to the human body when we sit in them. Most of us have a favorite chair. So I did a series of chairs, and these are just a few of them, looking at the life cycle for myself as a female and many women. So this is youth and promise. And then this is the one on the right is the crone. And the one on the left I did a number of years later. But what I love about them is when you sit in them and you feel the bark in your hands, it's like sitting in a tree. It's like connecting to the outdoors while you're in, which of course we've been a lot during COVID. At one point I became interested in expressing the importance to me of the Shema Prayer, which is the prayer that says that we are one, and basically thanks the deity for that and acknowledges it. And so with another artist, Nikki Green from Australia, also at an Art Kibbutz residency, we took the Hebrew letter that begins the first word of that prayer, the Shema, and did a 12-foot letter, which we then turned into a performance piece where artists and staff from the farm where the residency took place in upstate New York brought the piece down to a lake to launch it into the lake, and they spontaneously broke out in Hebrew song, which I wish I had a recording of, but we had a great time. Then it got launched into the lake for the summer, and the wind took it to the far end of the lake where canoeists could see it all winter. And then I'm told at the end of a year, it just sank and went back to nature. I later did a smaller version of the Shema, of the sh sound, which is more like 7 feet. As you'll see in this picture, I'm not only interested in critters, but I was always very moved by the bird's head Haggadah. And I find birds' heads frequently in the materials that I work with. You can see several of them there. And I love it whenever that happens. And I do some carving to encourage it, but it's primarily naturally there. And I forgot, Judith, to set my timer. Where am I? Are you muted? You're muted.
I didn't either. Keep going. It's about 5 to 12 if we run over.
Okay, all right. I love the traditions, and one of them is at the high holidays, where we are told to mend relationships, to mend our relationship with God through forgiveness, but we're not even allowed to mend that relationship until we've mended the relationships with other people. This is a detail from a 40-foot wide public installation where I invited the public to tie a ribbon, or actually a strip of fabric, onto the structure I created to make a commitment to themselves to heal a relationship in their own lives. And as you'll see, people did that. Hundreds of people did that over the course of the 10-day high holidays. But because it was in a public park, there were also other events that took place around it, including some summer weekend busking that was great fun to be part of and have created the background for. Many years later, I had saved a lot of the materials from that installation and was thinking about the preciousness of friendship and what a huge role forgiveness plays in maintaining long relationships and in healing those relationships. So I took those materials and created the first letter of the Hebrew word for forgiveness, slichot, and added the gold because long-term friendships are very golden and precious to me. Another thing that I love doing is bringing people together for Sukkot. This is a sukkah that I built. It's about 14 feet by 15 feet, and got a grant to donate it to the Hillel that serves many campuses in southern Maine. This was the first year when I used recycled plastic for the walls, and this is the second year when I found very inexpensive fabric that I could dye and use. We used this every year for 7 years, and then we, for a number of reasons, decommissioned it. But when the Maine State Museum launched its first ever exhibition of the history of Jews in the state of Maine, they knew about this sukkah and invited me to install a smaller version of it in the lobby of the museum, which had big skylights and lots of light. So I took portions of the larger one and created this. After that, I went to Oregon, to the Jewish Museum there, and did another one. I was really pleased. I was looking for a photo and couldn't find it. There was a Jewish Muslim conversation that the museum hosted, and the Jewish women who came to do the presentation chose this sukkah as the background for that conversation with everybody else sitting outside. More recently, this is the river edge again. This is the framework for a sukkah that went to New York, again using recycled plastic for something called sukkah wood, and that was fun.
Asherah, I think probably you should wrap it up so we have time for a few questions.
Sure. I will just say that I also do performance artwork. This is a piece called Jump War that you can learn about on my website. My daughter took the photo. This is another piece that you can read about called Friendship. And then these are some of the larger, this is 30 inches long, pine bark. And I will end with my homage to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The holes in the white birch are made by birds that peck through the bark to suck sap. And since she had such an inner light, I turned it into this.
Oh. Wow.
So that's it.
Well, thank you so much. That was
And
so
thank
moving.
you for giving me this opportunity. I was really happy to be with Diane and Ash doing this.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
why don't you stop share so that we can all see
Sure,
your
sure.
faces? And there are a few questions in the chat and comments. Fred Spinowitz asks, what material did you use to connect the branches of the Shin letter?
Of the Shin letter?
Like the big Shin installation, the 40, how long?
Oh, I use screws.
I wanted to say it looked like a double helix, the way you joined it together. And that was a lovely, I mean, there's so many elements of it that are so wonderful. Carol Kunstadt commented that the shadows are wonderful as well from the 7-foot Shin piece. Lots of comments about your Sukkot that they love. And let's see. Looks like Sylvia Harati has a question for Ashley.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just like say something about Asherah before we move to Ashley.
Oh, yes, of course.
First of all, it's fascinating work. I really loved it. It was very touching. And I would like to know about the branches when you went to the nature and you picked them up. Did you imagine while you hold the piece in your hand before it became a piece, that what you're going to do with that?
No, sometimes pieces sit in my studio for years before I know what I want to do with them.
You're a scrounger. I'm just imagining the stuff you have. We tend to do that, we artists. Any other questions? I didn't want to rush over Asherah.
Could I say just one more thing briefly? I also, as social sculpture, lead support groups for artists on Zoom. If anybody's interested, you can contact me through my website.
Fantastic. Wow. So, okay, I had a question for Ash. Kind of lost it. Oh, I think it was Sylvia Harati. Are you here? Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
No, my question is, hi. Okay, if you posted the links to your films, but I wasn't able to catch them. Is it possible for you to post them on the chat, or how can we
I don't
get
know.
them?
Maybe Judith can tell you, or
Well, I'm just trying to think. When we post the video, I don't know if the chat gets posted. I guess not.
No, they were. They showed up, and when he finished at the end of his presentation, there was a list of the links to view the. Yeah.
Okay, I've got it. Here's what we're going to do, because it's the simplest solution I could come up with. Just email me, judithstudio@gmail.com, and I will send you, anybody who's interested, I will send you the links to Ash's.
okay.
Yeah, I can't think of
it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It was fascinating. It was so strong and powerful. I mean, all three of the works, and they're all three of them are connected. It's really quite amazing and so powerful, so powerful. Thank you so much.
Oh, Dorit, I think we have come to the end of our wonderful, inspiring program.
That was a wonderful, inspiring session. I really enjoy all three of you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And I would like to thank the two Salon Open Studio Program volunteers. First of all, the program advisor, Yona Verwer. Everything is just because you are here and inspire us to do this. I also need to say thank you, Judith. It's such a pleasant working with you on this. This is joyful and inspiring, and it's a great teamwork. Also, Chana, Elias, and Cheselyn Amato, that you are definitely part of this successful program. So thank you, everybody. Next week, on Tuesday, December 22nd, we have presenting three artists, Audrey Anastasi, Ellen Lux, and Joanne Scherger. I hope to see you all there, and have a happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah, yes.
Hanukkah, we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.